What's up and welcome to Kplus Gaming Corner, and in this Outriders video I'm sharing my best builds, one for each of the 4 classes in Worldslayer. Now I would say each class has at least 2 or 3 great options in terms of builds you want to run, but I wanted to zero in on the one that if you were going for your best finishing times in expeditions or needed to carry a teammate or 2 through trials and you had to pick your best gear, whether you were a Trickster, a Devastator, Pyromancer or Technomancer, these would be your go-tos and the ones you'd select to get the job done. I want to also say these are my personal opinions. You may have your own in terms of what you feel would be the best choice if you were a Techno or a Pyro. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what your suggestions would be. So without any more delay, let's get right into it. I'm going to start with my Trickster, which definitely has multiple excellent options when it comes to running trials and expeditions. And now's a good time to explain my criteria when selecting these builds. I wanted to go with what I felt gives you the fastest clear times when running any of the expeditions, and at the same time it had to be something that could get you through trials safely, including all of the troves, and a build that takes down those arbiters in a reasonably fast amount of time, which in my opinion would be in or around 1 minute or less. I wanted builds that checked all these points, and while there are some that are better at certain things but weaker at others, each class does have at least one build that gives all of these benefits and at the same time checks the most important box in that they're extremely fun to play. With that in mind, and getting back to my Trickster, there were a few builds I considered, including Terminal Velocity, and I took a hard look at Shield Beast, but in the end I came to the conclusion that if you had to pick one, Edge of Time Trickster would be the way to go. There's a few different ways you can go with the Edge of Time armor set, and the way I have it set up is with the skills Temporal Blade, which the set bonus is doubling the damage of your Temporal Blades, Venator's Knife, and Hunt the Prey. The class tree is pretty straightforward as you're going bottom tree, following along until you get to Altered Executioner, which increases your anomaly power by 6% for each enemy in close range. You also want to get Anomaly Scything, which increases your anomaly power by 30% whenever you activate your melee skill. So you don't necessarily have to hit someone with the melee, just activating it is good enough. You also want to make sure to grab Counter Shield for some anomaly power when you're throwing out your Venator's Knives, Combat Shield's Timeline for another 50% anomaly power increase when you hunt the prey, and Anomalic Acceleration for another anomaly power boost when your Temporal Blade attack ends. The Pax tree is very important here as we're along the bottom. We want to grab Cheap Shot, which is going to make your melee lower enemies' armor and resistance by 40%, which is a great advantage in getting some more damage in. And then we want Goals Beyond Understanding, which states damage done to elites tagged with a deception skill, in this case Venator's Knife, has a 25% chance to be increased by 200%, so triple the damage, which is going to be a lot. Also important is Meticulous Schemer, which you'll notice toward the top end of your sources of damage when checking your stats after expeditions. With this, you're dealing 200% of the damage dealt to enemies killed while tagged with Venator's Knife to other enemies that are also tagged by the knives. You're going to see some crazy numbers with this as enemies of all types, including elites like Broodmothers, literally melt and dissipate before your eyes. The weapon you use is up to you. I'm going with a simple purple submachine gun that rolled with Violent Rupture, which always performs well, and also Critical Point for a 20% increase in the chance of landing a critical shot, and then rounding that out with Mage's Rage, so when you get those critical shots, your anomaly power is going up by up to 40%. My secondary weapon is a guillotine where I'm doing the Moaning Winds radiation splash thing, which is a great way to finish off enemies surrounding you and getting some additional damage into elites and bosses and getting rid of them faster. In the interest of time, and since I'm going over 4 different builds on 4 different classes, I'm just going to show real quick the gear setup and the mods I have on each. I'm still on the hunt for a better Edge of Time pants that roll with something other than Vaccinated. My luck hasn't been great there though, and for now Vaccinated is good enough. Not really a dead mod, but hopefully your luck turns out better on your adventures. Moving on to my Pyromancer, after a lot of consideration and testing, it was clear to me that the best build I had going with this character is the Lava Lich build I posted a little while back, using Phaser Beam, Overheat, and Eruption. Now since then, I've made some improvements and some updates, but for the most part it's the same build. I'll post a link to my previous video discussing my Lava Lich build in the description. And for now, I'll share my current class tree where it's pretty much the same. Feel free to adjust your tree as you see fit, but this configuration gives me my fastest clear times in expeditions, and I'm taking down the Arbiters in around 40 seconds or less. Just like before, I'll just quickly share my gear setup. I did finally get my hands on some good Lava Lich pants that came with Sunburnt, which definitely synergizes well with what I'm doing, and I swapped in purple gloves, which you'll notice I have Radical Therapy there, as well as Euthanizer on my helmet. These work well with my Sunfall submachine gun that comes with Noxious Spawns, which is applying toxic and dealing good damage, so in addition to the massive amounts of damage this set is capable of, I'm also dealing an additional 24% damage to enemies infected with toxic. So all in all, I'm pretty satisfied with the state of this build. Some of you in the comments section and on Reddit pointed out that I probably don't need Turn Up the Heat, which I have on my helmet, and I tried going with just one overheat but switched back because things just seemed to run much smoother and I was clearing rooms much faster doing 2 overheats before cooldown instead of 1. To each their own, I guess. Once again, you can let me know in the comments what you'd have there instead. Moving on from my Pyro and looking at my Technomancer, I have a few builds I could go with, in particular my Flame Leopard set and my Technomancer set. But if I had to choose one, I think my Flame Leopard edges out my Technomancer slightly in that it gives me a really strong anomaly power build and firepower at the same time. I'm using Cold Snap, Blighted Rounds, and Fixing Wave, which keeps my ammo stocked with the Blighted Rounds plus a few other perks. The set bonus turns the toxic that you're applying into Blight Fire, which is doing way more damage than just the regular toxic is doing. The class tree is as follows, where we're going along the bottom, grabbing some extra anomaly power, and then coming up to the middle tree and continuing there until we get to the capstone Overclocked, which states whenever you activate a gadget skill, which will be your Cold Snap or Fixing Wave, your anomaly power and weapon damage are both going to be increased by 40% for 10 seconds. Plus it also gives you a Phoenix-like effect where upon losing all your health, you'll get back half of your HP, so you'll have a second chance and hopefully will be able to escape the danger you're in. And this can happen once every 3 minutes. You'll also want to grab Exposing Frost, which allows the vulnerable status to be applied to enemies that are frozen, and your Cold Snap is freezing everyone, so most enemies will also be taking that extra damage that vulnerable allows. I go with Marked for Execution to make vulnerable 40% more effective, but this is sort of optional, so feel free to experiment and try some other nodes that may suit you better. For the packs tree, I'm along the bottom, pretty straightforward. I grab Override, which increases my anomaly power based on my skill leech, which as you can see is giving me a 39% boost. Hasten Influence, which is key since this allows you to spam your Cold Snaps and Fixing Waves. They'll be back off cooldown almost instantly as long as you're applying status effects onto enemies, which between your Cold Snap freezing and shooting toxic Blighted Rounds, you'll be doing that constantly. Also important is Burrowing Charge, which states critical shots are charging enemies with an anomaly explosive that detonates and does 250% of your anomaly power as damage on your next critical shot. You'll be shooting constantly and getting crits all the time, so Burrowing Charge will be going off all the time, and you should see this near or at the top of your list of damage sources when checking your stats. For my weapons, I'm using a Final Penance that rolled with Noxious Spawns, which is great in this build, and Final Penance comes standard with Mage's Rage and Anomaly Enhancement, so I don't have to change anything there. Once again, I'll quickly show the rest of the setup so you can copy and paste, and hopefully this helps you with your Flame Leopard setup. Keep in mind, Ice Ice Baby is pretty mandatory here, as that's how your Cold Snap will be melting enemies all over the map, and you'll need Long Winter, which I have on the gloves, which help your Cold Snap reach across the battlefield and hit as many targets as you can with each cast. Also important is License to Heal, which gives a decent weapon damage boost, but more important, it gives you infinite ammo for 4 seconds every time you Fixing Wave. This goes a long way in ensuring that you'll rarely run out of Blighted Rounds, in addition to the Quartermaster mod on the chest piece, which fully replenishes your current magazine when you activate Fixing Wave. The way this setup works is you'll activate Fixing Wave and keep shooting and taking out enemies, and after the 4 seconds is up and your ammo's starting to go down, by the time you're almost out and often even before, your next Fixing Wave will be ready and you'll be replenished, plus have another 4 seconds of infinite ammo, and you'll repeat this to have Blighted Rounds up the entire time stress-free. Speaking of my chest piece, that's the one weak spot in my build, as I would much rather have a good Robes of the Flame Leopard, but I've never gotten one that rolled the way I want. The best one I have is one that has Tactical Retreat, but that's not very useful for the way I'm playing, and would much rather have something like Captain Hunter or No Resistance Against the Fortified, so for me the search continues. Last but not least is my Devastator, probably the easiest choice I made in terms of which of my builds was best to showcase. I do have some strong Devastator builds that are really fun to play, shout out to Bannerlord and Deathproof, but the obvious selection here would be the Seismic Commander set. With this set, you're doing an extra 50% damage to enemies bleeding, and you're bleeding everyone all the time, and the skills I use are Earthquake, Impale, and Gravity Leap. My weapon is a Sunfall that rolled with Ultimate Bone Shrapnel for some good damage on critical shots, plus applying more bleed to enemies. I have Firestorm applying Burn, and then I added Mage's Rage to ramp up the anomaly power. Take a look at the gear setup, and I'll point out that I probably don't need Blood Shock for my Earthquake since I'm applying bleed in so many other ways, plus my melee skill can get bleed onto enemies as well. But I had already swapped out Ultimate Impaler previously when trying out some other configurations and ended up putting it back on, so now I need a new Seismic Commander helmet with a good mod and an APOC slot so I can replace these. I'm using purple pants since I've been having a hard time getting a good Seismic Commander's leg armor. I prefer ones that rolled with Vlad's Grasp since that's probably one of the better mods I'll get on some pants. I'm using purple gloves, which also could be better since Postmortem, while useful, isn't one of my favorites. Bullet Kindling is helpful though since I have Firestorm on my gun, so another 12% extra damage to enemies burning, and then I have Captain Hunter and Unstoppable Force on my shoes. I have 3 Earthquakes and 3 Impales at my disposal, plus Despair for my Gravity Leap, so with this setup it can hang with some of the best builds from any class in terms of expedition speeds and taking out Arbiters relatively quickly. Have a look at my class tree, copy and paste as you like. It's pretty simple, staying totally along the bottom and grabbing Paladin for extra anomaly power when you use any skill, and following through all the way to Earth's Heritage at the end for a 50% increase in damage from your Impales and Earthquakes. A few of you in the comments on previous videos have mentioned I should be using Strong Arm of the Anomaly, which would get me more resistance piercing for each enemy I manage to hit with my melee attack, and while I agree this would increase my anomaly power even more due to having on Unstoppable Force, I always forget to melee in this build as I'm always busy with other skills, and I'd also be stuck going through Unending Watch, which doesn't help me since I'm not using any protection skills. For the packs tree here, it's similar to how it is with my Bannerlord set, where we're down below getting Obliteration, increasing both anomaly power and resistance piercing, Earth and Shell to make you almost unkillable, Upheaval and Impact Point are going to be great additional sources of damage as you're using your seismic skills, and then finishing off with Multi-Strike, although feel free to try out Terms of Engagement here for a boost in Gravity Leap damage for another option. I haven't gone into Ascension Points much since this video is already a little longer than usual, but obviously if you're going anomaly power, you want to put your focus in there, and if it's firepower, you're starting with the extra weapon damage. You also always want to get extra damage against elites, and this goes for all classes. For the most part though, Ascension Points are up to you to fill in as you progress. Either way, there you have it, the best builds I'm currently running on each class, but in no way are the good builds limited to just these 4. I've already mentioned that each class has at least 2 or 3 extremely viable armor sets, and I would say also that when it comes to taking down the final Arbiter, Shield Beast Trickster running Spectral Spike in the packs tree and Technomancer are probably going to be the fastest. Let me know in the comments if you're running a build you think could be better, or if you have some suggestions on things you'd change in the builds I've presented. I'm always open to new ideas and trying out new things, plus as we share ideas, we help others who might need the help, or that final suggestion that unlocks their build and takes it to the top. If you enjoyed this video, a like and a thumbs up would be greatly appreciated, and if you'd like to know whenever more videos like these drop, be sure to subscribe to see what's next. A quick shout out to my first 125 subscribers. I really appreciate the support and had a chance to chat with some of you guys on some of my recent streams. You guys keep me on my toes and give great suggestions, so thanks again. And with that, until next time, peace.